Hello, my name's Nick Majerison and welcome to Techno Talk. Techno Talk is the commercial arm of Top Med Talk. And on today's Techno Talk, we're looking at my PreOp, a new technology which will be explained to us in detail by Dr. Paul Upton. We're also joined by Professor Monty Mython, Editor-in-Chief of Top Med Talk, and Pete Patterson, a sports psychology master. So if we bring in our contributor on the line at the moment, we have Dr. Paul Upton. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so I've been an anaesthetist. I worked for the NHS for 30 years before taking early retirement. But my career took me through the development of the Peninsula Medical School, where I was the hospital sub-dean and developed the Year 5 curriculum for the medical school. And I then moved into medical management and was the medical director in my acute trust. So I had 600 doctors reporting to me. And along the way, I've developed an interest in PreOp assessment. I was on the NICE working group in 2002, which set up which tests you did. And from that, I've then had this meeting with a guy, complete chance meeting. He's a designer, and we met on an aeroplane, and we decided that actually together we could do something really exciting. So he's done all the design bit, and I've done all the medical bit behind the scenes. And we've launched my PreOp under the company's name of Ultramed. But the key thing about it is that we're actually switching around the data ownership, so that rather than a trust or a hospital owning a person's data, it's actually the patient who owns their account, and they input their information into their preoperative assessment.
A recurring criticism of us, just because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are saying, hang on a second, surely you doctors are all over this information thing, surely the NHS has got one big joined-up system, you put the information into a computer, we all log on and look at it, and we can see what your blood measurements from for last week. That's just not true. And one of the challenges we have has been this reluctance to let the patient own their data, which we do during pregnancy, for example. You know, everyone who's had a baby will be familiar with carrying around their own log of the various information. This is all about saying, you know, it's okay for patients to own their own data?
More than okay, where it should be, because actually the Red Book that you're describing in pregnancy is, I think, the only example of truly patient-owned records. What we're doing is we're giving patients the right to own their own data. So it's a bit like a bank account. So you might send somebody a bank statement, but you'd never let somebody log into your bank account. And we're also then sort of trying to empower patients in terms of getting them fit for their operations, giving them the opportunity to learn more about how they can avoid complications.
Okay, so from my point of view, as someone who would be, someone who would use the NHS rather than working in it, how would this work for me? Make the rubber meet the road a little bit for me.
Okay, so when the surgeon says, I'm very sorry, but you need to have an arthroscopy on your knee, ideally you would go round to PreOp assessment, and you would then be given access to the program, which is in the cloud. You'd fill it in, and then your data would then be given to the nurse for the nurse to review with you.
And then how does the access thing, how does that work differently? Because I imagine I know nothing about how any of this works and start from there and work your way down.
Okay, well, if you look at the conventional system that's used mainly in the NHS at the moment, you would go home, having been told you needed your arthroscopy, and then you would come back to the hospital for PreOp assessment, and the nurse would ask you a whole pile of questions and write them down on a piece of paper, which would be filed in your notes. So it's radically different to be able to put your information into an online system, but you then retain as your own record and then share with your healthcare provider. Because as we go forward, people are having operations in different places, so that owning your own data is really critical to being able to share a current version.
So, Paul, I can imagine that one of the criticisms is going to be, not everyone has a computer, not everyone can get online, which I think is becoming very, very uncommon now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you look at the 5-year forward view that the NHS published, that was saying that 86% of adults regularly use the internet now, and that number is going up on a year-by-year basis. Not only is the number, but also the age of people that are using it. So, of course, there are going to be some patients that can't access it and don't have a computer, but they could come into the hospital and then be helped to fill their pre-op assessments in the hospital.
And is there anywhere else they could go, Paul? Because I've seen in some countries you can go to the local pharmacist or the library and get this sort of support. Have you toyed with any of that?
Yeah, we have started to look at that. We're early in our system. We've only built it in the last 3 years from sort of incorporating the company, and we've now rolled out our access in 7 hospitals. So we need to establish ourselves in the hospital setting, but what you're describing is absolutely right. It could easily be done in your GP surgery, for instance. Sort of one of the things that patients get frustrated about is telling the same story over and over again. So actually, if they've inputted their information and they've put in a really complete story, they can also then ask their questions, and they own that. So there are a number of patients that have to come back for repeat procedures. For instance, somebody having a cystoscopy for bladder cancer will need a check every 6 months for some years, so that they would then be able to maintain that story and add to it as they went forwards. And actually what we're describing there is a personal health record.
And within it, is there an opportunity for people to get ahead of the game? Because we're increasingly telling people, if you take some ownership, you kind of know you're overweight, you know you're inactive, you may or may not know you're anemic, pre-diabetic. Once you've got that information and you've got those flags, you can get ahead of the healthcare system and start to fix yourself a bit.
Well, exactly. So what we're doing is we're putting in, with the web links, every opportunity we can to say, you know that that's drinking too much, you know that that's smoking too much. We know that sort of stopping smoking 6 weeks beforehand will improve your outcome. And we're presenting patients their BMI and then asking them whether they'd like to know more about their body mass index in an attempt to get them to realise that this is a significant issue in terms of their likely outcome from surgery.
Much of this data is already held by the GP of most of these patients. Is there any way that the population of these records could be automated, perhaps?
Yeah, you're describing the sort of integration of health records. What we've done is we've come to the market with what's described commercially as a minimum viable product.
Right.
But then what we're trying to do is build the bells and whistles on. So
Sure.
I would love to be able to suck the GP data and the prescribing data out of GP systems to pre-populate this.
Okay, so let me check that I'm following this as closely as I think I might be. As I understand it, the distinction with perioperative care is where you have kind of an overall approach and everybody's involved in every stage of the process who may be doing the operation or the anaesthetist and so on. Is it the case that this technology that we're talking about here, this idea, would effectively do that, but kind of in an automated sense, so that when you're approaching an operation, you have all of the information straight away and you can make quicker, more efficient decisions? Is that right? I'm just checking I understand this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what we're talking about is just the starting point of the perioperative pathway, because the perioperative pathway is from GP decision to refer right through to sort of being back at home and rehabilitated. And we're talking about this sort of critical first bit where actually your information gathering and then you're making shared decisions with the patient about the benefits of going ahead with surgery or not.
Just picking up on something you said there, it sounded as though what you were suggesting is that the system actually aids triage. Is that right?
Yes. So what you're doing is you're able to identify your high-risk patients early. So everything that the perioperative medicine programs are talking about is identifying those high-risk patients and actually then putting in the resources to make sure that you've optimised their care.
So can we get to the cost, because we're under pressure to deliver value-based care? We thought we always did that, but we've got to drive up the quality while driving down the cost. This looks like it might deliver the quality, but what about the cost equation?
Yes, that's exactly right. So what we've found is that preoperative assessments vary in cost from somewhere between £50, and the latest trust I've been talking to is saying that their pre-op assessments cost them £160 per patient to do, and that's an average cost. Now, what we're doing is we're providing the My PreOp program for £5 per patient. So we're doing it as a software as a service. So if you then build your preoperative service back up with the decrease in nursing time, because the nurses don't have to do the data collection, then you find that you end up with a price per patient of around £30. Now, that's a modelled cost at the moment, but we think we can at least halve the cost of preoperative assessment. Now, when you put that in context, the NHS does 10 million procedures a year, so there is just an enormous amount of financial benefit to go at. But doing it as software as a service per patient use, we do need high volume usage to actually make the thing sustainable from a commercial perspective.
It does sound like a big saving when you put those figures together. I mean, I can't do it in my mind. It's total saving. I mean, that sounds like a lot of money is what I'm saying here. I just don't have the calculus to do it.
If I could share with you, Paul, I don't know if Pete could share his expressions verbally. Because I think he was...
quite amazed, shocked,
Yeah.
We're talking very big numbers.
Yeah. Talking very big numbers. So let me tell you about a study in 2011 that the Department of Health did. And that was a sort of modelling study, but it said that if the NHS adopted online preoperative assessment, electronic preoperative assessment, and it did that in 20% of patients only, it would save £65 million a year. and it hasn't been done.
And
that was the market opportunity that I saw. And then, having met this guy who's this designer, I thought he can design me the interface I need, and I can do the medical bit. So, the potential here is to save, $300 million a year for the NHS. There are very large numbers.
So what are the barriers? I'm sure people are listening to this and thinking, come on, just get on with it.
What's really interesting at the moment is that within 3 years, we've had the idea, developed the product, got it to the market, and got 7 hospitals using it. So that's very rapid in terms of NHS adoption. We've now got 20 trusts in 2018 who've asked us for demos of this product. So there's clearly an interest and a need, but the barrier really is the decision-making processes and the lack of initial investment, invest-to-save programs. So I think that we're seeing sort of movements in that direction, but the numbers of times clinicians are telling me, well, my trust hasn't got any money and it can't consider anything like this. I get that every day. Mm. So I think it will come, but it's just so slow. And when it's described as a no-brainer, you would just think people got on with it.
Any way that patients could empower themselves? Let's imagine Nick now does have to go, and he's heard all of this, and he doesn't want to take the half day off. Can he buy my PreOp? Can he give you a £5, fill his own one in, send it in, and save himself? He can work for an extra day. We'll be well up on the deal. Is that too radical?
No, it's not too radical, and it's a fascinating conversation because that is precisely what we've been talking about, at Ultramed. So, the conversation has been, why shouldn't patients have access to, the best way of assessing their preoperative assessment? Maybe we could do my PreOp private.
If I'd happily give you a £5 not to have the preoperative assessment. I'd be way up on the deal, personally.
You would, but I think that the question then is, would trusts that weren't using my PreOp then be prepared to accept that as their preoperative assessment? And we have had examples, in fact, of our own team who've been into hospital for procedures and said, this is what we've got, and they've said, no, that won't do. They have to go through their paper-based system.
So just one extra story from me is, and people will be able to work out where I had my pre-op assessment done. I came in, I had the blood test done. When I turned up on the day, they had to repeat them because they couldn't find the results. There we go. Anyway, so I probably want to know some details about where you find all of this.
Yeah, so Ultramed, you can find us very easily on the internet if you Google us, Ultramed, and the website's www.ultramed.co. Slightly unusual, we haven't got a .uk on the end of it, but you'll find us very easily. And similarly, if you put in my PreOp, again you'll find out information about the my PreOp service. One other thing we've done is we've also built the similar programs if you're having an endoscopy. It's called My Endo and My Cardio if you're going to a cardiac cath lab, because I've seen the same problems occurring in pre-procedure assessments in those units. So those programs all talk to each other and they're integrated, and they're under a trademark of UltraPrep, the ultimate pre-procedure assessment suite is how we've branded it.
Excellent.
Thank you very much to Dr. Paul Upton there telling us about ultramed.co, of course, the website to check out if you want more information about this, ultramed.co. And thank you very much to you for joining us here on Techno Talk. Pete Patterson joining us, the Sports Psychology Master. Thank you to you, sir. And also, of course, Professor Monty Mython, Editor-in-Chief of Top Med Talk.